Uh, so let's start with question 2. The reason I asked you to skip 1 because I feel like by now you know how to draw your curve, draw your bell curve, figure out the percentages. I think we're okay with that. Now we need to figure out the rest, okay? So we have 1 kilogram bags of sugar is being produced. The majority, look at your notes. It's there. It's when I talked about yesterday's topic on page 25. There's majority right there. So I have videos to prove it. Can't tell me otherwise. But it's okay. You forgot. All good. So that means that this range, right? The range is plus or minus 3 standard deviations, which tells me that there will be 6 gaps in between those two values along the bell curve. Yeah.
But then I still added the standard deviation and got the same mean and everything.
Let's continue. Maybe you'll end up being okay. I would have to look at it. So to find my standard, so I think you have to just know this is not one where you can use normal CDF for. You can't do that because this tells you the percentage between these two. Right, so now I need to figure out what's my standard deviation, what's my average. So standard deviation would be the high minus the low divided by 6, because I know this is we're talking about the same distance from the middle, so I can do a standard deviation like this. And let me see what my key says here. Standard deviation is 20 grams, right? So make sure you subtract first and then divide, right? So that would give you 1 mark right there. The mean, you have to be very careful. In this case, we know that they're both the same distance away from the middle, so we can just add them and divide it by 2, right? So 1070 plus 950 divided by 2, and that gives you 1010 grams. That's another mark right there. And then my bell curve. Normally I would want you to use a ruler, right? But here I would have 1010 in the middle. This is the weight in grams, right? All of that stuff. 1 mark is not quite enough, so I won't stress too much on that. I would give it at least 2 marks because it does take up time, right? And then you just go up by 20 grams, right? So 1030, 1050, 1070. And here you have 990, 970, 950, right? And then you see those values, right, along the x-axis, so we're good. You go up the mean, go down like this. It should be tapering off, okay? A bell curve should be like smooth transition. You fill that in with the percentages, which by now, you know what? You pat yourself on the back. You're really good at that for the most part. Maybe some labeling missing, but I can handle that. Okay, so if you have a curve with the values at the bottom, you get a mark for that. That's all I'm going to look for here. So if you have these numbers there, you get a mark, and that page is 3. Moving on to the back. Did that answer your question, Francis, or no? Yeah. 1 mark loss for the standard deviation. No, that one's still 1 mark. Yeah. Yeah, because in the curve, guys, here's my bell curve. Okay, I have a bunch of copies. Okay, I just want to make sure that yes, you can mark a 4th standard deviation, but you know that 0.15% that I always talk about, that sliver, that goes on to infinity. It's not comprised to the 4th standard deviation. It's everything to the right. Everything after this, it's all of it, right? So you can't say that from here to here is 0.15. That's not accurate. It's all of it, okay? On either side. Okay, let's do the bin question. So this is obviously not a frequency table, so I'm reviewing for the test as I'm doing this, right? So it's just values. So just enter that. One variable stats, right? This is just L1 like that. And my mean is, what is it, 6781. It's already on the paper there. 67.81. What are we in? Points, yeah. We'll just go points. And the standard deviation is 7.62 points. And I will just make sure N, in this case, it's 16 individual players? Oh, games. I should read my question now. So we're talking 16 games. Yeah, 16 games. So the N is my sample size, which in this case represents the number of games. Okay, so then I don't have this on my calculator, I just have the key, right? But if you did this right, you have three in here between 52 and 60. You have 7 in this bin between 60 and 67. You have 4, and then 1, and then 1. Yeah, there we go. So I'm just quickly 10 and 6, 16. So I have everything counted for. Yeah.
Did you have to start at 55, 37, 33?
I always start here. If you choose to stop here because you realize you don't need this bin, that's fine with me. I just do that. Okay, I'm just telling you, if you want to have no issues whatsoever in any question I ever throw at you, going forward to either side will solve your problem. It may be an empty bar, empty bin, but it will still be right. Okay? Does that make sense? So yeah, not necessary, but it's there nonetheless. So let's say now I threw another game at you. You could, right? You could just use the same bins, the number of bins, and put stuff in there, and it should be fine. So if you have these numbers at the bottom there, you get a mark. Okay, if those are correct, you get a mark. If you have the right number of values in every bin, you would get another mark. And I'd say for all the work and whatnot that goes into making your line and writing out the numbers, you get another mark. So 3 marks, I would give this 3 marks because it's quite a bit of work going through your list and making sure you're doing it right. I would always say sort in ascending order L1, right? I would always do that before I start putting stuff in the bins. It's a lot easier. You know what? You don't have to, but oh boy, like you will make mistakes if you don't, because you're going to go all over the place, this bin, that bin, right? So if you just have it arranged, use technology to help you. Okay, histogram. I think at this point I'll just show you what the finished. You should be pretty good at this. I will probably give you a grid, and using a ruler, right? You just put these numbers down from the top, and you put a zipper on there to make sure you get it right. Score, and that's points. I forgot this here. This would be games, right? I forgot that. Half a mark deduction. And I kind of just circled where my mean is. It's probably a good idea to like highlight it, underline, or just flat out put the X bar there. And then you know that's my mean, that's the average, that's the middle. And now we're checking for whether or not it's symmetric. It's not quite symmetric around the mean, I must say that. But it does, if you go the midpoints, if you connect them, the graph itself does have a bit of a bell shape to it. And as I said, it's not perfect. So by the graph, you will probably not always be able to make the right decision. So you have to continue your journey, okay? So let me just block this here. So I do one at a time, right? So you need to check the general rule, right? empirical rule within one standard deviation. So if this is your mean and you take one standard deviation to either side, that'd be 7 and 4. If you add that up, it's out of 16, right? 11 out of 16, it's 68.75%. That is as close as you can possibly get, right? That is pretty good. So that passes with flying colors, no problem. Then within 2 standard deviations, right? If you go to your mean, you add up from here to here, right? Which is basically these 4 bars, which is basically everything except for 1, right? So that's 15 out of 16. That's 93.75% versus 95. We're good there. And then the other one is 100%, which is quite often going to be the case, right? If you go 3 standard deviations to either side, it's all of it, which is usually going to pass anyways. It's right. It's all of the data. So it's the first 2 that are going to fail. Most likely the first one. If that one fails, you can actually stop. You can just say it's more than 5% off, not considered normally distributed, right? So I will say here, data is normally distributed, comma, since it follows the 68, 95, 99.7 rule. Okay, so you just make that statement. I'm saying yes because it follows that rule, and that's how we deal with it in this course. And I will let you keep this one. No, I worked so hard. Way to go. Then be ready tomorrow. Okay.